What was your "oh shit, this person is a psychopath" moment when meeting people? One day as a teen, a friend showed up with a classmate who we never really hung out with before that. That day, he found an occupied bird's nest in my window awning and flipped it, causing fledgling little birdies to glide in several different directions. No sign of parents. They couldn't quite fly yet. I went around trying to gather the little birds I could spot in a possibly hopeless attempt to put the nest back up and put the birds in it. This took a few minutes of treading carefully while scanning the grass left and right. Then I hear the freak kid say, "You guys won't be mad, will ya?" I look up and he's holding a cinder block over his head, standing over one of the birds I hadn't found yet. I said, "Yes, I will," and he just dropped the block on the bird. Kid was a piece of shit, and we never associated after that. At a bar in Frankfurt, Germany, talking military stories with a soldier who was a former sailor. We both spent time in Subic Bay, Philippines. He starts laughing as he was telling a story about how a house manager at a brothel yelled at him for asking for a 12-year-old girl. He says at first she looked confused, and then once she found out he was serious, he forced him out of the brothel and called him bad person as he just laughed his way through the story. I was shocked and confused and kept waiting for the punchline. That sick son of a B*** was telling the truth. I told him that I agreed with the old woman and that he was a a person. He needed to seek help. We parted ways pretty quickly after that with him accusing me of being gay or something. I never saw him again, but I feel sorry for other people who don't know his true nature. When I was about 18, I helped a friend of a friend move. Dude was a weirdo, but I thought he was okay. Did not really know him. He talked about his cat, but I never saw it, thought he was in a cage somewhere. After a couple of hours of hauling stuff, he opens the freezer. There is the cat, jumping out and running for its life. I was so pissed, but the guy laughed and was like, "Well, it's a hot day," and I also did not want it to leave while we moved boxes. Like there was no other solutions. He thought it was the funniest shit. Cat got out, and we never saw it again. Hope it did not get frostbites. It was there for at least 2 to 3 hours. I got chatting to a girl at work once. We went out for lunch cause she seemed cool and ended up sitting at the edge of a canal munching sandwiches. There's a pigeon with a gammy leg hanging around hoping to get some food. She lured it closer and closer to her with bits of bread as we were talking, and when it got close enough, she just knocked it into the canal. Turned around to me laughing her arse off like it was the funniest thing ever and was shocked that I wasn't impressed. I was in the army, mandatory conscription, and I had this bunk mate who was not very well educated. We would be guarding the gate of our unit at night from 2 to 6 a.m. and not allowed to leave our post, so I couldn't get away from him. He told me stories of how he strangles cats and throws them off rooftops or plucks the feathers of caged birds and then releases them to watch them fall to their death. There was a cat that lived in our unit, and whenever he saw it, he would kick it into a wall, and when she birthed a huge litter, our CO wanted to poison them, and he volunteered to get the poison and fed them himself. The mother cat wailed for days on end looking for them because she had left them and couldn't find them when she returned because he had thrown them in the garbage after they died. The face that he had pulled off a mouse, took it out of his pocket, placed it over his finger, and started playing with it. In front of me, Uber driver on Christmas Eve tried to show me videos of people's corpses after an accident. I was getting my first tattoo from a dude who said some crazy conspiracy COVID shit, but like whatever then says children who get molested deserve it because they were molested in another life. There were several other people in the building who heard and no one said anything. Suddenly the tattoo started hurting 10x more and I started crying and said I had to quit. So I have an unfinished tattoo from 4 years ago. Roommate meets a dude and invites him over for a beer. The dog would not chill when the guy was in the house. Ears back, hackles raised, continuous growl. An otherwise friendly dog just lit up. It was a very contagious feeling, and we were all on edge except the guy, who acted like it was a natural response. A few months later, the guy went to prison for the violent assault of a stranger. The guy I was working with told me how he killed his neighbor's cat because it was annoying him while he was studying. Thought it was hilarious too. Brought it up so casually, as if it was just a silly little story. He could not understand why I was freaked out. Growing up, there was a kid younger than me. Bright white skin and jet black hair. He hit the look. One day, he vanished. Ends up there was a small space between the utility shed and fence at his apartment where he hurt animals. Parents moved pretty swiftly from there to get him treatment. A former coworker would make a point of flirting with / propositioning married men. She would really ramp it up if the guy's wife was pregnant. Those are not the actions of a normal person. I'm gay, and I dated a guy that used to lie and treat his poor employees like garbage. But when I broke up with him because of the mental abuse, he convinced a court to give him a pro tem domestic abuse restraining order because he falsely accused me of raping him, stalking him, and threatening to kill him with a gun. He got the idea from his psychopathic sister, who would make up lies about all of her ex-boyfriends when they tried to dump her and even badly injure herself, and make it look like they did it so that they would go to jail. Long story short, I fought it in court, and with a lot of evidence in my favor along with the stupidity of lying to the court and skipping a court date to go skiing instead, it was dropped and he was ordered to pay my legal fees. Moral of the story: learn to spot these people, because if you don't, your life can be ruined overnight. When standing in front of 600 people, telling them they'd all just lost their jobs with zero redundancy, they smiled. Prick got pleasure from seeing grown men cry. Trigger warning. When a former coworker said he was glad no women were on the project because they always screw everything up, and he leaned over to me, I was still a young man, with the creepiest glare in his eye, and said, "It's a good thing they have a gash, right? That's all they're good for." As if I was supposed to agree with that and be okay with it. Then he talked about wanting to go to a strip club so we could drug and R-word some women. I was stuck traveling with him for a week, but I did report him when I got back, not for my sake, but for any unfortunate woman that might have to be stuck working with him. He didn't last very long after that, and I don't think it was because of me either. I was part of a testing team on a naval base in SA. Met a few lifers, including some wrecks. One in particular stood out: older, now overweight dude with a thick mustache, but apparently in his day was a machine. Dude would calmly describe shooting civilians, children, pets, burning down villages during his years in Angola, and other delightful conversation topics. Knew full well it was all sanctioned, and he could say what he wanted with no repercussions. I was like a leopard seal, literally no light behind them. Sitting in the basement, with him between me and the only exit, him pissed drunk, late at night, describing in detail how he used his connections to find the person who raped his sister and murder them. He described it in extreme detail, what it's like to kill someone and watch the life fade from their eyes. He was from the mental ward at the hospital my sibling was at. My sibling brought him home because they were dating, they met at said ward. I later learned most of the details were made up, except the murder. He also burned the person's corpse and went on a joyride with their girlfriend using the victim's credit cards. And yes, this was the first time I met him. Far away from land on a boat. My newfound friend tells me he may have punched someone so hard they're still sleeping. Like a coma? I ask. He looked down and kept fishing. I had an ectopic pregnancy, which burst, and I was rushed into surgery. When I woke up, the surgeon walked in and showed me a folder filled with photos of the surgery and the fetus he removed. No consent, just shoved them in my face. He's showing me this album with a grin on his face, like he's showing funny photos of his pets. I was clearly distressed, and he had zero empathy for someone who just lost a baby. My mom met him and said there's something very wrong with that man. It was like he got enjoyment out of my suffering. I wish I never saw those photos. They're burned into my memory. My SIL's niece. A few years ago, when she was about 7, she was left unsupervised and microwaved their pet hamster. When the mom asked her why she would do that, she shrugged and said, "To see what happens." It's my understanding that the hamster may not have been the first family pet that little girl has offed. This random old lady poked me in the eye when I was just standing at the corner of the street. Started calling me names after LMAO. My first relationship, when I told him I wanted to break up, he showed up outside my college, unbuttoned his shirt to reveal my name carved on his chest with a blade. It was the person I was dating at the time. New relationship. It was just the two of us hanging out, and the way that he acted made me think that he thought he was performing for others. I can't quite explain the experience, but it felt truly bizarre and off-putting. Like, does this man think he's on a TV show right now? We also had an argument where he was mad at me for something that had literally never happened between us. I asked for an example of whatever it was, and he said he couldn't think of one right now. I genuinely don't think he could tell fact from fiction. He wasn't okay. I had to sit next to one of the Columbine shooters through grades 1 to 3. I hate alphabetical seating. He was a psycho back then. A friend of a friend started reminiscing at a party about when they were kids and used to torture animals. Always had suspicions about this person, and you could tell he was pissed about his fellow psycho revealing these childhood details. Cloak totally dropped. Started noticing more and more unexplained behaviors and noped right out of that friendship. I was working for a judge on a case that involved a home invasion, robbery, and assault. The husband successfully fought off the guy, but was injured. We've seen murderers in person, but this guy gave everyone the creeps. There was nothing behind his eyes. Fortunately, he was convicted on all counts and was sentenced to life. No chance of parole. I should note we heavily suspected he was targeting the wife and didn't anticipate the husband being home that day. So we suspected he intended something worse than he'd confessed to. Well, mine is about me. Jehovah's Witnesses showed up to my door, and before I could say anything, they said, "We see that you're busy. Have a good day." Then they left. Bible sales lady, who used to go door to door selling special edition Bibles. Lady had those wild eyes. Made all the neighbor kids cry every time she showed up. All she had to do was look at them. Turned out, the lady used to hit the bottle big time. Even gave her husband a black eye. Last I heard, the lady was doing time at that place in Chowchilla, and her husband was living off the grid. Wild shit. My sister-in-law's new boyfriend, a neurosurgeon, related an anecdote about some sort diagnostic that was performed on a pregnant woman, resulting in her fetus perishing. He thought this was a humorous story to relate to my wife and me with our 2-year-old daughter. I worked at God TV once, not a believer, and one day, Rory, one of founders, flew in. He was treated like God himself. And I got to meet him. He shook my hand and I looked him in the eye. It was like the eyes of a great white, all black, no soul. Never forgotten that. Guy I worked with could emulate any emotion, but actually felt none. He could manipulate others, but felt literally nothing, no empathy, sympathy, or joy. This guy said he wanted to join the military to kill people, and before then he'd been a creep towards women. It's just that the wanting to kill people thing nailed it in the head for me. An old coworker said his dad told him he used to snap puppies' necks when he was a young kid, but he can't remember doing that at all. Probs def, the most disturbing thing anyone's told me. When I was a kid and still forced to go to church by my mother, there was this other kid my age, maybe 14, who was getting really involved in the church and wanted to be a preacher. He even would do these little mini sermons from time to time during the normal service. Anyway, immediately before he gave one of these sermons about peace and brotherhood, he casually mentioned that he had a bearded dragon and got tired of it, so he filled its water bowl with Windex. The way he said it with no emotion and then put on a big smile when he walked up to the podium was chilling. I was just telling my daughter about this. When my ex and I spent our first time together in the blizzard of 16, we were snowed in. We were really digging each other and took a huge chance knowing we would getting snowed in. Anyway, he is retired military. My oh shit moment was about day 3 of the 5 days, when he started cleaning his gun on the kitchen table, but he looked AR me with an insane look in his eyes the entire time. That same weekend, he also told me if he ever pointed his gun at me, run. Additionally, he showed me his numerous skull tattoos for each person he killed while serving in the military. When I was 6 or 7, we had this project at school where the teacher got us 2 caterpillars and we tried to raise them all the way to butterflies. 2 kids always stayed about 15 minutes longer after school to take care of them for the day. When it was my time to care for them, the kid that had to do it with me just took them in his hand, ran out off the school, and stomped them to death. The day I was sitting in his vehicle about a year after marrying him and hearing him lie to parents, he was a coach, about things that he had no reason to lie about. And it continued the longer we were together, where he would just lie to people at the oddest things. Then during our divorce, things got really ugly, and of course, everyone who knew him on the surface thought he was wonderful. But those that knew him better do not. Went back to high school for alumni weekend, private boarding school. and got drunk with some friends. We reminisced on old times, borrowed a golf cart from security, and went riding around the lake on campus. It's nighttime and dark, but we see a bunch of geese in the headlights, and they start scrambling out of our way when they see us coming. My friend who was driving didn't slow down but sped up, running a couple of the geese over. One was unharmed from what I could see, but the other had its neck bent in a weird direction and was trying its best to hobble away. My friend stopped the cart, got out, calmly walked up to it, stomped on the injured goose, and dragged his foot across its neck till we heard a sickening crack, and the goose stopped wailing and moving. He then jumped back and like nothing had happened. I was speechless and sickened after that. We're not friends anymore. A dude I met in 9th grade told me that he made a mine with gunpowder from firecrackers and killed his own cat. So yeah, the second I see that an animal is involved, I'm scrolling away. I do not want to know.